Honest J. Nowak. Oh yeah. A pleasure to meet all at last, and welcome back to Honest J. Nowak. So here on HJN, I might as well go on ahead and refer back to blood. Because in the past I've talked about blood types, but there have in fact been a couple of questions to find out if I'm actually going to touch upon blood in general and not just about the types of blood that people would have in their systems. So, I might as well just go ahead and just talk about blood in general. Blood itself, the red fluid that everyone has to have in their body to survive for pretty much their whole life. If enough is lost, or if your body cannot make enough, then well, there's a good chance that you may not be able to live long. Of course, depending on how much blood you got in your system right now, it isn't definitely important to know that by now, many people happen to have a lot of different ways to find out if something is wrong with their bloodstream. Whether it be from clumps of cholesterol or crystals of uric acid. And I have in fact talked about it before though. So of course, aside from all that though, blood itself happens to usually be something that happens to keep us warm or cold during certain times of the year. If it's winter or summer or in between with autumn and spring, then expect your blood temperature to regulate itself automatically. Depending on how high your body temperature is or how low it could be, your blood can actually help with fueling yourself to keep yourself warm or cool down during certain times of the year. But it would also help to know that the fact that blood itself does in fact have many different types of colors on them. But every single color happens to have a different story to tell. For example, if it's black, then it certainly means that it's completely disintegrated itself. And if you're not very familiar with the fact that a contusion or bruise would often show you different colors of blood itself. Because the first time you ever get yourself a bruise, you might have yourself a somewhat bright color that's shown underneath the skin, which is supposedly to show that a blood vessel had broken and that the mark on there is indefinitely a contusion. But of course, as time itself goes on, depending on how fast your body itself heals, the contusion will change colors. It'll change to a darker color, usually blackish and blue, which of course is the breakdown of certain capillaries. And then it eventually turns into green and yellow, and then in brownish, until eventually it all fades out due to the blood cells that have been broken down completely wiping away. And eventually it's all healed and good to go again. But of course, aside from the colors and the like, my blood itself is actually pretty bright. And the reason for that is because of how much oxygen I take in. I've already talked about the fact that I had a doctor's appointment a few months ago, and apparently my oxygen level is higher than average, at 98%, which is outstanding, according to them, in their research. But above all that, it definitely does mean that my blood is much more oxygen rich, and therefore it happens to turn into a variety of different brighter colors like pinkish and orangish. And of course, that would indefinitely make me a pretty rare species of human being that happens to take in more oxygen than anyone else would ever be able to do. Of course, there still has yet to be more part about that, but blood itself can also harbor certain things that could kill you, like sugar, cholesterol, or caffeine, or alcohol, or anything else. Because if those levels ever spiked up, then well, it would obviously mean that the alcohol or caffeine or otherwise had entered your bloodstream and is starting to overflow each of the cells in your system. And the brain itself would need a viable amount of oxygen from the blood cells to be carried upwards to it in order to keep itself active. But most of the time, whenever someone lacks oxygen in their blood cells, then the brain cannot really work that well. Your brain does need a large amount of oxygen, plus water, and a few other nutrients in it, just to keep stable. But of course, depending on how much you take in every day of all those things that I mentioned, then well, your brain can either be an exceptional performer in mental acquisition, or it could just simply be a rotting piece of organic matter. But you know what? I'm just gonna, cut off that slack right there and just simply note there's more subjects to come. A lot of them. So if you want to see more, go down to my channel. Make sure that you like, subscribe, comment, follow me on social media, and stay on the Hollywood side.